Welcome to Her Path to Success, brought to you by the Arab American Women's Business Council. Today we're talking to Mary Zatina, a Senior Vice President at Beaumont Health, and we're going to talk a little bit about when you're interviewing, how do you make the interview work for you? And a little bit of tips from that. So what we're going to do is we're going to hand it over to Mary. She's going to introduce herself and just let us know a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Tahara. Well, you said my name, Mary Zatina. I'm a lifelong resident of Detroit, and I am with Beaumont Health. Beaumont Health is a large health system. It came together by the merger of 3 health systems: Oakwood Healthcare, which I worked at for 8 years before joining the bigger company, Botsford, and also Beaumont Health System, and we call ourselves Beaumont Health. And for the system, I do government relations and community affairs.
What exactly does that entail?
Well, government sources provide about 60% of all the revenue that comes in to our healthcare system. It comes in the form of Medicare or Medicaid payments. And so relating to government entities at the local, state, and federal level becomes a really important thing to us. There's so much change going on in healthcare now, prompted by the Affordable Care Act from 2010. Some of those changes have been fantastic, and some of those changes, like anything that's new and different, need a little improving. So part of what I do for the health system is help explain why something that started out with good intentions now needs a little tweaking, if you will, in legislation. And our legislators at the local, state, and federal level also want to know more about Beaumont Health and healthcare, and they have constituents who need healthcare services. So I'm that interface for them in government relations. And then in community affairs, we just try to make sure all the communities we serve, and it's about 100 cities in Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb counties, that people who live in those cities know that we're an asset to the community and that we are connected to them. So it's my job to stay connected, and it's one of the reasons I'm really happy to be here today.
And we're very happy to have you. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, today what we're going to talk about is typically when you go to a job interview, most people just walk in, answer the questions, and walk out. Is that the best way to do it, or do you have any ideas on how to make it better for the interviewer and the interviewee?
Well, that is the way most people do it, and that can be terribly scary. And people plan and prep in advance for how am I going to answer the typical questions. What I would encourage your viewers to do is think of a few questions of their own and use those questions on whoever is the hiring manager or the person interviewing them. Because when you ask good questions, and we've heard this before, right? You never learn anything by talking, you learn by listening. So when a candidate for a position is asking powerful questions, they'll learn some things about this employer and about the job that benefit them, and they'll also be impressive in the eyes of that hiring manager.
So it's always good by asking questions, you show that you're not only wanting to work there, but you have interest in it, and that it kind of shows a little bit about the type of employee you'd be.
Exactly. And there's different kinds of questions. There's multiple choice questions. We all had our fill of those in college tests. There are closed-ended questions, and that would be a question that can be answered with a yes or no. Do you want to work for this company? Yes, no. Of course, nobody'd say no on an interview. But I'm craving that more people ask open-ended questions, a question you can't answer with a yes or a no, but a question that requires a long or detailed answer. So here's an example. You have asked me all your questions, but now typically a question will be, is there anything you'd like to know about us? Is there any question you have? That's when you pounce with your own questions. One of them might be, what does success look like in this job in 30 days or 60 days or 6 months? How will you know I'm the best candidate for the position after a period of time? What would my goals look like, and how would I know if I've achieved them? You might ask a question about the culture, that gets at the culture of a company. Why do you work here, Tahara? What makes you proud to come to work every day? What do you worry about when you think about the future of this company? What do you really look forward to? See, you can't answer those questions with a yes or a no. There has to be dialogue, and that'll be a rich dialogue where the interviewer learns more things, and wait a minute, the interviewee learns more things, and the interviewer realizes, this is a thoughtful person who is curious about this position, and she or he made me feel good because it got you talking and not just interviewing.
Right.
So that's my advice. Come armed with good answers to the questions you can reasonably expect in an interview, but come armed with some really good open-ended questions too.
I think that's great advice, and something that I not necessarily would have thought of to do. And I think the best way to do open-ended questions is to do your research on the company you're going to interview at, which is something that some people take for granted. They don't do their background and they don't find the history of it, so they just walk in and say, here's my resume.
That is a really good point. And there's a little bit of a sneak preview you can get by reading the company's press releases. So if the organization you're going to work for has a web page, most do, go looking for what they call the newsroom or news or press room, something like that. And then see what stories did they tell and how did they tell it. Because when a company or a business or a nonprofit issues a press release, they're telling the world something they're really proud of. So you can research their stock exchange behavior, you can research quotes, but if you look at those press releases, then you're really seeing the soul of the company and what they're most proud of and what they want the world to know, and ask some questions about that. I see you announced a new product line and opened new business ventures in Beijing. How's that working for you? You know, they'd be really impressed to know that you knew about this big news in the company.
I think that's very interesting, and it's very important to do. And if you do and you ask these questions, I think it's very important not only for you to learn more about the company, to know if you're a good fit for the company, but also to know if the company is a good fit for you and your lifestyle.
That's absolutely right. And one of the best questions to ask when an interview is wrapping up is, when will I hear more from you if I'm a successful candidate? Or if you'd like me to go on to the next level, what can I expect to hear from you? Because sometimes we think we did a great job in an interview, and then we hear nothing. So at least you're sort of walking out knowing, I'll know the next steps on this position in a week or in 10 days, or they'll send me something via email or so on. And that can be comforting to have that in your mind when you're exiting an interview.
Definitely. And I think another key point too, and you can tell me how your thoughts on this is, once the interview is complete and let's say you didn't get that job, what you can do is always get feedback from them and say, well, how can I have done it better? Or what can I do next time? Or what qualities am I missing that I can work on?
Absolutely. And I'll tell everyone, write a thank you note. Make sure you collect the card of everyone with whom you had a conversation, collect their business card, and write them a note. It's okay to do it on email. I love good old-fashioned typed notes or handwritten notes, but email is fast. Send that thank you note. It may make the difference. If you're in a maybe pile, you're not all the way in the yes pile, sending a thank you note can make the difference. And then to follow up, if you don't get a call back, you might very politely contact the person who you interviewed with and say, thank you so much for letting me know I wasn't called back. I'm of course disappointed, but I'm going to continue my job search, and I wonder, do you have any tips or techniques for me on improving my presentation style? And then you have to close your mouth and wait till they answer. They won't want to say anything offensive, But they may say something like, well, you know, you were a very strong candidate, but some of the other candidates brought a portfolio of their work. And we were able to see what they had done that made them qualified for this job. Aha, I just got a good tip, right, for the next time I have a similar interview. Right. So that takes courage to call back and say, why didn't you pick me? But there are riches to be found in doing so.
Oh yeah, and it's definitely something to be said about learning the culture of the company as well. I mean, even from personal experience, I interviewed with a company where I asked a couple of people that I knew worked there, and they said, you know, it's a great company to work for, but crazy overtime hours till 8 o'clock at night, and it's expected. So be prepared. And I went into the interview, and afterwards when they asked me, is there anything that you would like to know? I said, you know, what are your overtime hours and what are your policies regarding for that? And they kind of took a step back and they let me have it and said, you know, our home base is in Japan, so we have conference calls at 5 a.m. or 8 p.m. and that's expected. And at the time, that wouldn't have worked for me. My work was not going to be all my life. So what I did is I said, you know, I'm going to have to respectfully decline. And I went on to bigger and better things.
Well, that's exactly why it's great to ask questions. And you can, if you think about them in advance, you can find the nicest way to ask questions. For example, if I'm selected for this job, I would want to give it my all. Can you tell me a little bit about the typical hours in the day that I would be expected to participate in meetings and things? So, you know, I've put it in, I really want to do a good job for you. I'm not looking to, you know, skate through this. But what should I know to prepare and be ready to give it my all? So if you kind of think about those kind of questions and things that are important to you in advance, not only are you walking in with your answers to whatever questions they can throw at you, you have some really good questions to throw back at them and know if this position is right for you.
I think that's all great information. Great tips. Thank you so much, Mary.
My pleasure.
So just for our audience, just to give you a quick recap, when you go into an interview, do your research, know the company that you're interviewing with, find out the culture, ask people who work there how they feel, and then when you go into the interview, come prepared and be willing to ask them questions and get to know a little bit more about the interviewers and how they feel about the company. And that'll definitely help you be remembered and make a good impression. So again, we thank you for joining us on Her Path to Success, and we look forward to seeing you next time.